All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Dr. McKay. She can introduce herself and get this webinar going.
All right, sounds good. Alicia, I do have the chat box open because I am going to ask for participants to answer just a couple of things as we go through. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I didn't know if you had anything to say about the council at all before we get started, but this webinar came about through my research in family engagement for my dissertation. And that was back in 2016 when I started my research. So things have changed somewhat and changed for the better. So that's a good thing. But this is important information for everybody to know because if it's not a policy, it's not going to happen. So that's why we talk about creating these engagement policies. And you'll kind of make this connection as we go through each of the components that I'm going to discuss with you today. Go ahead and move to the next slide. So just to give you some information about me, my name is Dr. Teresa McKay. I am a full-time instructor for Penn Foster High School, Career School, and College. I also adjunct for both Rasmussen University and the University of Arizona Global Campus, very involved with all three schools. But I also own and operate my own consulting and training business, Hands-On Learning ECE. Hands-On Learning was the name of my last preschool, which was an in-home facility. I was just sharing with Alicia that two of my kiddos that I had from birth, they left me in 2016. That was my last bout as a teacher in a classroom per se. And they just came down for a visit. They are now 11 going on 12 and have grown way too much for their auntie, Dr. T. So a lot of this information is based on my observations with those families that I had in that, families that I have dealt with throughout the years, and then of course the research that I did. So if you would like to connect with me to get more information, these are the ways that you can do so. I'm pretty available, so anytime you would like to get a hold of me, please reach out, follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to keep my tweets up to date. It's not always easy, but I do have some information that I do share, hopefully at least once a week. So, all right, go ahead and go to the next slide. So we are going to dive right in. There's a lot of information. I do tend to talk fairly quickly. If you need to stop me, just put something in the chat, but let's go ahead and take a deep dive in. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So my two research questions, you can see them here. These were the things that I wanted to know. What you need to know is that the two programs that I selected were both high quality programs via the STARS rating program in the state in which I did my research. They were both not top level, but just the next level down because neither of them were accredited. But they were considered high quality programs in the area where I did my research. The second thing that you need to know is that they were highly recommended programs by word of mouth from the families that they served. Now, when you think about that, you kind of think that, well, then the research is a no-brainer, right? They probably do everything correctly. Not necessarily. Go ahead, Alicia, to the next slide. Here's what happened. There were two programs. I did one center-based program, one family home childcare. Again, remember, these were high-quality programs. There were two administrators that I worked with, 4 educators, and 3 family members. Now, this is a small sampling of people, but this was a very tight case study per se, but I did review their entire policies and things like that. So here's what I found. Communication was great, but it was only one way. And we're going to talk about why that's so important here in just a moment. Both programs had great activities for families that were highly attended and got great participation. But they were just that. They were just activities. They did not engage the families. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then policy, there was no policy. When I asked everybody, I was like, okay, what is your policy on engaging families? And I'll give you one hint that the center-based program actually hired a family engagement coordinator, but they didn't have a policy. Okay, and so when you don't have a policy, there's a disconnect. And that's why I am so vehement about this and so loud about preaching this. So go ahead to the next slide. So who benefits? If we're truly engaging our families, everybody benefits. The research tells us this. Our families benefit, and they need to know how they benefit from this. This is why we want you to be engaged with our program. You understand step by step then the knowledge of what we do for you and your children. Then you take that information and you can turn around and use it to support your own child at home. We give you the confidence in your own ability to support your child. So we're here to support you as well as the child. And then when they are truly engaged and they have all of this information under their hat, then they have a better view and a better understanding of what we do. They are going to less likely refer to us as babysitters or just preschool teachers and really understand the process of what we do. And I feel like this is the most important benefit. Children always benefit when their families are engaged, right? We know the research tells us that they have better outcomes. They tend to stay in school longer, they have higher achievement, and they graduate and usually tend to go on to higher education. If you want any research on that, there's a couple of things that you can look at. The number one is being the Perry Preschool Project from High Scope. That followed children from preschool for 40 years to see their terms of success and the benefits of being in an engaged early childhood program. So I highly recommend to do that on your own. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we benefit because it improves our own practices. We have an increased understanding of that all-important family view, background, and culture so that we can incorporate that into our learning program. When we understand the family and where they come from, then we can better adjust what we do to support that. And then just when families are engaged, believe it or not, it really improves your overall faculty, staff, employee morale. Because we're not spending so much time going, man, I wish parents would do this. Man, I wish parents would do that. I wish we could change the parents. Those are the things that we say all the time, right? We have to understand, number one, that we're not changing anybody. We have to understand that when we engage them, we just give them information and that's what they need and that's what they want. And then, of course, if we improve our program, we make all of these changes, we show the community that we can support the community in numbers, greater impact on their services through integration, and then, of course, increased access to those services for families. Next slide. So, oh, there we go. We have to build the foundation. When we don't have a foundation for anything, and children learn this as early as infancy, right? When they're trying to build something or stack something, if the foundation isn't there, it crumbles, okay? So we have to really provide that foundation. Go ahead to the next slide. So in the principles for effective family engagement, you will see, this is on NACCE's website, you will see that it says one of those components is to build a comprehensive system of family engagement. What does that mean? Well, it means that we have to have a system in place in our program to ensure that family engagement is going to be carried out. Okay, so we have to build that engagement policy piece by piece. So the first thing we have to look at is, what is a system? Okay, so I only copied a couple of the pieces of the definition from Merriam-Webster because there are several. But a system is an organized set of doctrines, ideas, or principles that explain the arrangement of working in a systemic type of program, right? So basically, an organized or established procedure, and then, of course, a manner of classifying, symbolizing, or schematizing. So we are going to say that this is a family engagement system. This is our the way we're going to classify it, right? So what all of that means is it's really going to focus on 3A here, an organized or established procedure. Again, if it's not written down, families don't know what you want them to do. You don't know sometimes what to do in order to implement this. So we have to have a system in place. And that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to kind of show you how to build this layer by layer. I love the analogy of doing this as, starting with the foundation and moving upward, right? It's just like we're building a house. Go ahead to the next slide. So, and then a policy within that procedure or system, right, would be the definitive course or method of action. That is going to be the thing that we are looking at today, the methods of action in order to really create a good system of family engagement. So these are the individual actions within that procedure or that system that we're going to talk about. It's a high level plan, and it looks at the goals and the acceptable procedure. So what you're going to do is you're going to define all of this for the families and for you as a program. So when you're looking at creating policy anytime in a program, there are two people or two sets of people groups, I guess I should say, that are going to be involved. You're going to have your families, actually three, your families, your employees, the program personnel, and then the children, right? So we're going to be focusing on what do we want the families to do? How do we expect them to do it? And then here's what we're going to do for the families, what they can expect from us. So you're technically writing two sets of policies every time you do a policy, right? Tuition policy is no different. Here's what we expect from you as part of our tuition policy, and here's what we give you in return as part of that tuition policy. See how that works? Next slide. So why do we do policy? Again, if it's not written, it won't happen. A policy is nothing more than an action plan. We can't take action unless we know what that action is supposed to be. So when we have it written down, we have a common language between all of the factions that are involved. It then becomes a priority for you when it is written down as a policy. Just as much as that tuition policy is a priority, so is family engagement when you get it written down. It's available everywhere and in everything. So in other words, this policy, as well as every other policy that you discuss with a family that walks through the door that is looking at your program, this is going to be included. So we always go over tuition. We usually always go over nutrition. We go over curriculum. We need to go over family engagement so that they understand, here's what we expect from you. Again, the more information you give somebody up front, the better able they're going to be able to A, make a good decision for their family, and B, understand what is going to be expected from them. And so we now are putting words to the actions that we want to employ. We want families to be involved. Nobody's ever said that we don't want them to be involved, right? But we have to be able to put words behind those actions. And then it's accountability. Ask your families often. I did surveys in my program every quarter. Here's our survey. It's the same questions all the time, but things change and people's opinions change, and maybe we fall down in an area. So I always asked for input. I also asked for input from the faculty. What are you seeing in your area that we may need to address as part of this policy? I can take this information and always use it as a gauge to what am I doing effectively, what am I not doing effectively, and what am I going to do about it for the next time, okay? And then our program administrators really need to do an effective job of tracking this information. So it's not like we're going to just take these surveys and go, oh, they hate us, oh, they love us, oh, they hate us, oh, they love us. It is taking that information and always give them opportunity to write stuff down. I don't just give them a check mark, like, okay, tell me, put it into words. If you're going to complain about it, then I want it in words, and I ask them for a solution. So I might say, what are your biggest concerns with our program right now? And then what solutions do you propose to fix it? Because I can then incorporate those in my policy, right? And then I can also issue information to the members of the communities, to businesses. I sent packets out about my program to every business in my community. And part of that was we engage families and we engage you as partners. But we're not talking about them today. We're only talking about families. Next slide, please. So whenever you are creating a policy or a goal, or an objective, or anything that requires us to put an action plan into place, we need to address the 5 W's and the 1 H. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. How are we going to do this? Why is it needed, et cetera. So the very first thing that I want to address is, why is policy needed in the beginning, to begin with? And I said, if it's not written down, they won't do it. But that's not the only reason. Why do we want to have policy? Because if we don't, nobody knows what the other person is going to be doing. Who's involved with each application of the policy, with each component? Who's it going to be involved? Who does it apply to? And who is responsible to act on it or to carry it out? What do we need in order to meet this policy? It could be physical materials. It could just simply be communication. What is needed? Where is the policy going to occur? The first thing that you want to know is where you're going to put that policy. You're going to put it in your family handbook, in your employee handbook, and anywhere else that it needs to be. I kept it as a separate thing. It was in both of those handbooks, but I also had it on a separate sheet, so that if somebody said, hey, what's your family engagement policy? Here it is. And so, determine, what do you think you need to have in order to communicate that? When are these certain aspects of it going to happen? For example, if parent conferences are part of your parent engagement plan, when are those going to happen? What is expected of every person who attends those? What exactly is going to happen? Okay, you don't need to write a book. These can be answered in bullet points as long as the information is given to the family in a way that they can understand it. So we don't want to put a bunch of, ECE wording in it. We just want to make it simple enough so they understand, oh, I'm supposed to show up for 4 family conferences. Oh, I need to attend these events because, oh, I need to do this. I need to fill out this communication, et cetera, et cetera. That's what they need to know. What do I need to do? And when do I need to do it? Where's it going to come from? Where do I take it? All of that information. And then the how is answering all of that information and giving a clear, number 1, we ask you to fill out an ASQ every quarter on your child. return it here by this and this date, that kind of thing. Give them the step-by-step procedures that they need in the how. Next slide. I was trying to slide myself and I couldn't. Um, so here's an example. Let's say one of your policies is, we want a family information area outside of each classroom, okay? What's it gonna look like? Okay, so we kind of want to start drawing this out. Why do we need it? Why are we implementing this? Why is this needed? Because families want an area where they can pick up information easily, yada, 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 whatever it is that is your why. Who's going to be responsible for setting these up and who's going to maintain that information? Okay. What information, materials, items, etc., are going to be included there? Where will they be specifically? And I love the way this one is set up, this example, because they're looking at focusing on quality, and that is what they're trying to communicate to the families right now. Here's how we're going to do it. So there's kind of a subsystem in this system, right? Where will they be specifically? Do you have room outside of each classroom for a table like this and a dedicated bulletin board area or posting area or what have you? How often is it going to be changed? How often is it going to be there? If it's going to be permanent, then we just say it's permanently going to be there. How often are we going to rotate those materials? And then again, how? Putting all of this together, specify the space, gather the materials, who's going to do what, where, when, and why, and what's it going to look like. So start sketching it out on paper and say, okay, here's what we're going to do to meet this thing. And that's the thing about implementing policy. You can only really do it one step at a time. So your first step is going to be kind of taking this information and going, okay, I need to come up with an overall outline of my plan. And then you go back in and you fill in the blanks, right? So then you kind of take, okay, the first one is why. Why are we doing this? We need to communicate to the families. This is why we're implementing this family engagement policy. It's going to be a new addition to your family handbook. So we're going to print this out for you, and we just ask you to put it in your family handbook. I made my family handbooks those 3-ring folders where you can punch things and there's brads in there so that they could easily remove or replace anything that they needed to in their family handbook. Oh, next slide. I keep forgetting I'm not changing it. So the thing that I got from most of my research, both for my project and just outside research, was, oh yeah, we have an open door policy. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have an open door policy? Generally, it meant that my door's open at any time. You're welcome to come in and visit your child. You're welcome to come in at any point in time in the day. And that's it. There's really nothing there that tells them what they can do when they get there, where information is if they want it. There's nothing in an open door policy that really tells families what they need to do or what to expect from you. So an open policy, I mean, that's great. We always want to have that open door policy of you can come in anytime you want to. We don't restrict that. You can ask questions. You can do this. You can do that. You can participate, but we need to put meaning to what it is that they're actually coming in for, right? And so, yes, I want you to know that my office is always open. But here are some of the things that you need to know so you don't have to come in here. Not that I don't want you to, but because if I don't give you that information, you're going to be in my office all the time, right? So, and generally, families will question policy quite a bit. So we need to make sure that we give them as much information in all policy as we possibly can. Next slide. So here's the meat and potatoes. Open door policy is parent involvement. What's the difference between involvement and engagement? Involvement was we dictated everything. We need you as a parent to do this. We need you as a parent to do that. We want you to do that. You need to cut out these things. You need to come in and read a story. You need to provide cupcakes. You need to, you. There was no we. Okay. It was very one-sided. We used them as free helpers, not equal partners. very one-sided, almost always initiated by us as the educators. And then we weren't giving them options that met their needs, which meant that they were feeling guilty when they couldn't participate. Nobody wants to feel guilty about stuff. So then they bend to the program's needs as much as they possibly can, but then they're not getting anything out of it because they're just doing it because they have to. Engagement starts with building relationships with the families. You have to build the relationships. If we don't build relationships, it's just them versus us. And we used to be that way. We used to say, hey, parents, you stay over there in your lane. Us educators will stay over here in ours, and we're not going to mix it up because that would just upset the apple cart too much. No, we need to include them in what's going on, because who knows that child better than anyone? The family. And at EYC, over and over and over again, in your CDA process, you heard families are the child's first teacher and the home is their first classroom. Nobody knows those children, even though they may spend a majority of their time with us. Nobody knows those children like the family, okay? Because they have that intimate relationship with them, hopefully, not everybody. We need to then learn how families can be involved. You know, oh, you can't come in and read a book? Great, we understand that. What might you be able to do? So I need to look at my survey that I send out to families and just say, well, here's your options. You can read, you can bring in cupcakes, you can do this, you can do that. I need to reevaluate my survey and say, okay, what are some things that would really help the family? Yes, it would also help me, but it will also help the family. And then give them options that are more meaningful to them. And so what I did was I just like, you know, hey, if you were to be involved in your child's program, what are some of the things that you would like to do? I just asked them. And then we kind of went with kind of worked with it and said, okay, here's kind of what we heard from you all. And now how can we get you involved? Okay. Working with them to develop their own level and their ability to engage with the program. Then the responsibility is then divided equally between parents, grandparents, extended family members, friends, educators, that's you, and community members. Like, they're also members of the community, right? So do you have connections outside there that you could help us with this piece? You know, those are the type of things that we're talking about. But the bottom line is engagement means we have a relationship and we meet the family where they are. Now, here's the definition of, for real, for family engagement. Family engagement's sole purpose is to support the education of the child. It's not to have chaperones go on field trips. It's not to have somebody to bake cupcakes for every party, which is probably not even allowed anymore, right? It's not that. It is solely so that the family can learn, know, understand child development to the best of their ability, how it affects them and how it affects their child, so that they can help you make decisions on behalf of the child. So just a quick type yes or no in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind. How many of you knew that that's what family engagement was for? I assume you can find the chat. It should be at the bottom of your screen, chat. Who knew that that's what family engagement was all about, what it was for? Yes or no? Don't worry, I'm not calling anybody out or anything like that. I'm just kind of taking an informal poll. Okay, one, yes, sweet. So I'm preaching to the choir for at least one person. Anybody else? Anybody not know that that's what the purpose of family engagement was? Like, I think there's at least a handful of people who have not responded. So go ahead and continue to do so. But Alicia, go ahead and move to the next slide. It is very important for us as the educators to know and understand this process. Now, this is part of the foundation of family engagement that was used in the research from NAEYC to develop their policy on family engagement, okay? So basically what you see in the middle here is outcomes, and then you have the child on one side and the family on the other. And then you see down the next arc is areas of practice and then program foundations. So what we need to do is look at the foundation first, right? We're talking about foundations, our leadership, that has to be us, any professional development, such as what you're doing today. And then remember what I said, surveys and forms, evaluation, and continuous improvement. So this is not a policy that is one and done, just like your tuition policy is not one and done, right? Every year we reevaluate our tuition policy and see what we need to do with it. We're going to do the same thing with every policy in our handbook. What do we need to do? Send out those parent surveys. The family surveys that you guys put out for the CDA certificate or credential, that's a great survey, and there is nothing wrong with using something similar to that. However, always give families the option to write in some comments, because then they can feel freer, and make it anonymous if you want to, or they can sign it if they feel comfortable doing so. So then the next layer in building family engagement then is, what does my environment look like? So remember, we've already had an example of that. Where can families gather? Where can they get information? What's available to them? Transitioning between classrooms, between age groupings, from one side of the building to another side of the building, any type of transition that's going to come about with the child and the family. This one is probably one of the most important ones, engaging families as teachers. That is one of our primary goals. How do we do that? I'm going to show you a little glimpse of that. Home visits. If you are a Head Start person, you're quite accustomed to home visits, but guess what? There's no rule that says that only Head Start can do these. As long as you implement a policy to your families on home visits and make it part of your program, then you can incorporate those. And I highly encourage you to do so, because you will learn so much about a family by doing home visits. And I mean constructively learning so much about a family and understanding where that family is coming from, because we don't get to see their day-to-day, right? We see them rush in, we see them rush out, but we don't know what goes on. Home visits really gives us an indication of what their relationships are like, and then how we can incorporate that information, right? And then, of course, relationships. We talk about that. And I include the child in that relationship as well. And then, of course, community partnerships. So for the child, then the outcomes are school success, but much more beyond that, okay? Children get a very good, strong support in social emotional development when their family is involved. Regardless of the type of family, they get that bonding, okay? And they understand that they are being supported, and that's what leads to school success, okay? And beyond. And then the family, really then starts to understand the education process, and then they can follow the child throughout their educational career and know and understand how important that is. Families who are engaged at the preschool level, especially those that start with when their child is an infant, tend to be more engaged as families throughout the child's school year, as opposed to those who weren't engaged at this level they tend to not ever become engaged in a child's school. And now more than ever, it is so important to keep our families engaged in their child's education, regardless of where they're going, where they're attending, etc. Go ahead to the next slide. So what is that foundation again? Remember we said if we don't have a strong foundation, the whole thing is going to crumble. Next slide. So the foundation for family engagement is understanding what it is, right? So we've kind of covered that, but what I need for you to understand is that document upon document upon document that is part of our field's purview talks about this piece. So this is from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, the Children and Family, Department of Children and Families, the Children's Bureau. Family engagement is a systematic, we've already talked about that, right? Inclusion of families in activities and programs that promote child development, learning, and wellness, number one. And then we include families in the planning, development, and assessment practices, engage families as partners. We establish those positive relationships and we nurture those relationships between families and the community. And then we have those systems and practices used by the program to ensure those connections between families, educators, and the community. It is an indicator of high quality. Next slide. The QRIS system, if you are in a state that has a quality rating scale for your programs, they have stated it is a critical and integral component of high quality early childhood care and education policy for learning and development. Next slide. DAP in engaging community relationships. All of this. I'm not going to read this all to you. I forgot to ask Alicia, but if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint, I will be happy to email it to you. Just we can figure that out at the end, but we take responsibility for those relationships, right? We tell the families how important this is. We work collaboratively, side by side with them. We do welcome them into the setting, but those opportunities, those events that we have, bonfires are great, but how am I bringing families together for the purpose of education? Okay. Am I purposefully providing time for the families to get to know each other, to support each other, to create these bonds? When you do this, those families start bonding, and then your entire program really becomes like a family. And so keep that in the back of your mind. How can I make all of these crazy different people, and we're all crazy in our own way, right? We all have our quirks, we all have our things, right? How do I get all these crazy people together for a common purpose? And that common purpose is always going to be their child. And so that's what you start with, okay? Next slide. Oh, I think, did you go one too many? Yes. Okay, so the position statement for professional standards and competencies. So if you were going through accreditation through NACCE, this is just professional standards for practice. It's not an accreditation thing. I mean, it is, but it's not. These are the standards that we agree to uphold as a member of the early childhood field, okay? Member or non-member, accredited or non-accredited. We are too, and you guys know this because it was in your CDA standards as well. Know about, understand, and value diversity of families. Collaborate, there's that word again. Through respectful, reciprocal relationships and engagement, and then using community support resources to support all of this. Next slide. Position statement on equity. This is a new, oh shoot, what is it? It's the DEI statement, diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that NACCE just recently put out. That we respect that the family is the child's first teacher. It's right there in black and white. Acknowledge that each family's definition of their composition is their own, and we should support that, okay? We put personal things aside, and we understand that families come in all shapes, sizes, colors, compositions, etc. We are learning about and honoring the family's child rearing values, languages, and cultures. This is important, you guys, because not every culture, not every background believes what you believe about young children. So it's putting all of that aside and honoring. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that we have to practice any of them. It means that we honor it, and then we come to a compromise when it comes to working on things in the program. Then we are supporting families' rights to make decisions for and with their children. Next slide. So you see, all of this is support for family engagement. This is how important it is. Then, if you are going through, allergies are high down here today. Early learning program standards, okay, standard 7. If you're going through accreditation, the program establishes and maintains collaborative relationship with each child's family, okay? And it is to foster child development in all settings. We establish relationships based on mutual trust and respect, involving families in their child's educational growth and encouraging them to fully participate in the program. Next slide. And then, of course, our code of ethical conduct. It is all about that relationship. We support the bond between the child and family. We support them in the context of family, culture, community, and society. We respect the dignity, worth, and uniqueness of each individual child, family member, and colleague. We respect diversity, and that we know that everybody reaches their full potential based on context of relationships that are based on trust and mutual respect. Next slide. So then that leads us to, who's a family? Who are we talking about anyway? So you can see here that there are so many definitions of a family according to Merriam-Webster. So it's the basic unit in society, traditionally consisting of 2 parents rearing children. Also, various social units differing from but regarded as equivalent to the traditional family, okay? Spouse and children, a group of individuals living under one roof and have one head of household, basically. A group of people with common ancestry, such as a tribal family, something like that. People or group of peoples regarded as deriving from common stock. However, people define themselves as family, okay? So next slide. So who are your families? Who are you serving? When we're looking at families, we're looking at 1 or more children and the adults who have sole or shared primary responsibility for that child's well-being, their guardian, their primary caregiver, regardless of what their family looks like. Next slide. I think we had Merriam-Webster kind of backwards there, but that's okay. So then let's take a look at the different generations and why is this important? Because if you are me or around my age, I'm a baby boomer. And so it's really important to understand, I don't have any skin in the game, okay? So my kids are grown, most of our kids are grown, but it is important to understand that maybe some of grandparents, because I'm of grandparent age, may be boomers. So it's important to know and understand that maybe we've got a skip generation family, which means we've got a grandparent who now has custody of a grandchild. It's important to understand the gap, the generational gap between the grandparent and the child. Okay. Gen X was the next generation through 1980, and also are of grandparent age. And Gen X, different than baby boomers. Okay. So we may have some of those folks in that. You rarely are going to have any parents falling in this category, but you might, because some people have chosen to have children later. Generally, you are going to be dealing with families who are millennials or below. Okay. Now, right now, most of them are going to be millennials. Okay. Because they are now between 25 and 40 years old. So that's where the primary families are going to be, unless their families are mixed. Okay. And then Gen Z is the next one. These guys are right now about 24 years old at their oldest. Some of them may be families, but again, it's important that we understand the differences between each of these generations. And then the children that you are working with now are Generation Alpha. Okay. So these guys that are in Generation Alpha, regardless of their parents' generation, are, for example, never going to know a society in which there was not a computer, a cell phone, internet, and things such as that. Whereas baby boomers, Gen X, and even some Gen Y, we were at the cusp of that. Okay, so you kind of see where we are. It's important to know who our parents are, who our grandparents are, and then who we are raising right now. And we are raising Generation Alpha. Next slide. So millennials, these are our parents, right? They have a high media consumption. Netflix, this is where they get their information. Okay, and this is important to know, because where they get their information is going to influence what they feel, what they want, what they expect. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? They are very comfortable with mobile devices, and only about 32% of them are still really using a computer. Okay, social media is their modus operandi when they're communicating most of the time. They're shaping events, things that are going to shape their thoughts and their attitudes towards things. The recession that happened, not now, but earlier, the explosion of the technological age, and of course, social media, but they were also influenced heavily by 9/11. Okay. This generation also has massive student debt. Okay. So they are not making major life purchases. So when you think about that and you're thinking about your millennial families, many of them may not own a home. They may be renters. They may be living in apartments. They may be very nomadic. They may move from area to area depending on what's going on in their world. So this is important information, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, but this is how you begin to understand the families that you are working with. Next slide, please. Gen Z, okay, these are our 24-year-olds. Think about this as we transition closer and closer to moving from millennial families to Gen Z families. They had their first mobile phone at the age of 10. Okay, think about that. They grew up playing with their parents' mobile phones or their tablets. A hyper-connected world, smartphone is their preferred method of communication, and they spend about 3 hours a day on a mobile device. Their shaping events, of course, is phones, technology, social media, never knowing a country not at war. Interesting. Financial struggles of their parents, the Gen Xers who have that massive student debt. Okay. And then similar to their parents, their financial attitudes are going to be similar, but they don't want to have debt. Important to know, because that's going to influence their thoughts, their ideas, how they approach their families. Okay, next slide. And then these are the kiddos we are raising. Okay, they are, they have smart devices. We have Alexa. We have, technology in almost everything we do. Many of them have now attended school virtually, even our preschoolers, right? Because of the pandemic, okay? They are now going to gravitate to online learning because they kind of got used to it. And so now they are using online programs such as Khan Academy, Prodigy, and others to learn. They know how to Zoom. They know how to research things on the internet, those kind of things. Their shaping events are, of course, going to be this pandemic, things related to social justice, Trump era politics. You can take that however you want to look at it. And then, of course, they say Brexit. I'm not really sure how that will really influence our kiddos, but it might. We kind of don't know because we're still kind of in the middle of that. But these guys are digital natives. They will expect, as they grow, integrated, personalized consumer experiences. So again, think about this. Our kids, we can just tell Alexa to order something for us, and it magically appears at our door. So this is kind of what we are working with today. And again, this is important because this is how we engage families. So this tells me that, back in the day when I did paper newsletters to my families, most of my families are going to want all their information electronically. Okay. Next slide. So here are the changes in the family perspective. 51% of baby boomer parents were really involved in attending PTO, going to events, that kind of thing. I don't know what happened to the Gen X parents, but 52% of them, so not much change, same thing. But then look at 61% of the millennial parents really value education. And it goes even further in that they want information. They seek information on things such as brain development, social emotional support, and computer issues. Okay, how is my child going to learn? Okay, next slide. So who are your families? So on the right-hand side, I have these drawings that represent just a few of the families. On the left-hand side, though, you can see all of the different kinds of families, and I've probably left something off of the list. Okay, so each one of these families is going to represent something different in your program. Doesn't make them wrong, it doesn't make them odd, it makes everybody unique. But guess what? We still all have a common bond, a common goal, and that is our children. All right. So take time on your own. Again, if you need this PowerPoint, I'm happy to show it to you. Yeah, all my drawings that were submitted today were by my daughter. She did them for my book. But take a time and look at your families and really draw out a diagram like this and represent like how many of your families are same-sex couples, how many of them are traditional, how many of them are single parent, and how many of them have more than one child or only one child or 8 children, or how many of them are in foster programs and those kind of things. Really kind of look at who's in your families and what this means to you. Take some time to draw this out on paper and really figure out what I need to do. Use that generation information to go, okay, I need to really address this and this and this and this. Next slide, please. So if you build this policy, will they come? Field of Dreams people. Anybody a Field of Dreams fan? That's where that came from. And so yes, my daughter drew our own little ECE Field of Dreams. If you build this policy, will they do it? And yes, they will. Not everybody. You're never going to please all the people all the time, right? You're not going to ever get 100% involvement, engagement. But if you go to all of this work, I'm going to guarantee you that you're going to get results, and those results are going to be better for everybody. Next slide, please. So how do we build it? So brick by brick, next slide, and layer by layer. And those are the layers we're going to start talking about now, okay? Next slide. So our layers are found in the NACE Principles for Effective Family Engagement. Basically, we are having our families engage in decision-making and goal setting for their child, two-way communication. Remember we talked about at the beginning where involvement was just one way, two-way, okay? Yes, I'm going to give you emails, I'm going to give you letters, I'm going to give you newsletters. But I'm also going to give you things to fill out for me so that I can get communication from them, okay? So it's going to be reciprocal. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. We're going to give them the information that they need to support learning activities in the home and how to connect them in the community. And then we're going to get them involved at the program level. And we're going to teach them how to advocate. When we do that, then we will have a comprehensive system for family engagement based on our definitions from earlier. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So layer one, before we can do any of this, hopefully your program already has these, but if not, you really need to start looking at them. You need to have a vision and a mission for your program. Why does your program exist? What is your program's goals for the families? And I'm going to guarantee you that you need to include something about families in the vision and the mission statements. Next slide. So a vision is the faculty of sight, obviously, something that has been or is seen, the way somebody perceives something, but it's also a mental image produced by the imagination. So when a family picks up a pamphlet about your program and they see your vision statement, what image do you promote in their imagination? Next slide. So I want some participation here. It's we've got about 30 minutes left, but I do want to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So very quickly, if you were going to come up with a vision that pertains to families in your program, what words would you put into your crystal ball? Just pile them out on the chat, just very quickly, please. Participation is important. As I tell my students all the time, I am not your sage on the stage, I'm your guide on the side. Okay, start giving me some words here. When you think of a vision for families, focus, inclusion, absolutely. I'm going to put one of my own in there, partners, because we've talked about that, right? What was another word that we heard over and over and over again in these definitions? Support, that's a good one. Starts with an R, I'll give you a clue. It's a big R word that we've said over and over and over. Yes, thank you. Relationships. So a vision statement is just that. It's a statement. It's usually a one-sentence statement. So hard to wrap up your whole program into one statement. But think about this. Hands-on Learning, the name of my program, exists to build relationships with children, families, and the community. Supportive relationships, focused relationships, inclusive relationships, and you can use all of those words. There's really no rule on how many words your sentence can have, but it really should be a tagline. It's like a tagline. When people say hands-on learning, oh yeah, that program that does this, right? One sentence vision. So think about that. What is your vision? Why do you exist? Okay. Next slide. So then your mission is a formal summary of the aims and values of your company. Okay, so this takes that vision statement. That looks really scary when I put my hands up that close, doesn't it? It's like I'm coming after you. I'm not in 3D, I promise. But it's a then further version that defines what that vision statement means. What is your purpose? Okay, we exist to do this, and this is how we're going to do it. Okay, so then you can take each one of those qualities that we've talked about with our vision and then provide a full on out mission statement. Next slide. So what is your mission? What do you want to do? And I'm just going to ask this rhetorically right now, but think about that. What is your mission? If for some reason you decide to purchase my book, you will see examples of that and have a worksheet in there that kind of guides you on how to create a mission. And guess what? The mission follows the same rule as the policy: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Okay, so that's what needs to go in your mission statement. Next slide. So then our next layer is the ever important relationships. Next slide. Reminding yourself, the Gen X and millennial parents, and now part of that Gen Y, they are proud in their ability to raise their children, but they totally admit that parenting is a challenge, right? I don't know a generation that doesn't say that it's not a challenge, but maybe. They need and want information and support. Somebody said support, and that's important. Supporting them, engaging them, relationships, partnerships, equal support. They realize the need to make connections with the male family members and caregivers. So a lot of our kiddos now are not getting that, and they know that it's important. Okay. Even same-sex couples that are women will tell you that they value the male role models in their children's lives. Okay, they just simply choose not to have them be a parent, whatever, it could be an uncle, it could be a grandparent, whatever, but they recognize that that male influence is important. Okay, they readily say that they cannot find resources they trust. So remember what we said about these parents. Where do they find their information? Netflix. And Google and those kind of things. That is not always reliable information. So that tells me I need to provide them the good information, the researched information that they can trust, and I can let them know how they can do that. They seek information on brain development, as I told you before, social and emotional and social developmental milestones, and good discipline strategies. Okay, so baby boomers were spankers by and large. We are not in any of those generations right now. So now we want strategies that we can use for good guidance. Next slide. So a reciprocal relationship, which Alicia put this picture in for me, and I like it so much better than the one that I had. I want to steal it because a reciprocal relationship is one of those that is a binding of each of the two parties, and it is continuous. It never ends. For example, like I shared with you, my kiddos from my preschool, their parents bring them down here to see me every year. That is a bonded relationship that I have with those families. And of course, I still have that relationship with those children. It is amazing. So when you start these relationships, I mean, guys, I have a relationship with one of my very first students whose children are now in high school. She was one of my very first students over 40 years ago. So it's an amazing thing when you build those relationships, they strengthen and they stay. Next slide. So we don't really have time to do this math activity. I would love to do this, but think about this. We have 168 hours in a week. Assume that every child gets 8 hours of sleep per day, and you add that up times, the whole week. And so the remaining hours you have left are 112. Well, then how many hours do they spend in care or school? And then how many are left with their providers? With their family? Not a lot, okay? And 8 hours of that's going to be, that's minus the 8 hours that they're sleeping. So the interactive hours that they have with their families is few. They do spend a lot of time with us. But when we partner and build those relationships with their families, it becomes more cohesive, and they don't feel like they're lacking in their family, and they don't feel like they're over spending time with their caregivers, if that makes sense to everybody. So do that in your head and kind of figure that out. It's amazing to see what the number is. Go ahead and next slide, please. So what do we do? Well, our first impressions are huge. So when a parent walks into, when they drive up to your program, what do they see? What do they see? Because first impressions are held in the first 7 seconds of somebody's purview of your program. So as they're driving up to your program, they haven't even hit your driveway yet. They see your building. What do they see on the outside? What does it look like? And then when they walk in that front door, what does that look like? That is so important, you guys. Does it say this is a place where families are welcome? Or does it say this is for children only? Think about that, okay? What can you do? And I'm just giving you some ideas here, okay? These are just things that you can do. Not all inclusive, but some things to start sparking your thought processes. My biggest thing is I wanted to have a separate room for families to gather. I created a library. It was for both the practitioners and the families, but the families had their own section. There was a conference table in there, and they could sit. The coffee was in there, snacks were in there. They could sit and they could chit chat with each other. If they were waiting on their child to finish up something or what have you, they could chit chat with each other. I had an area that was just for them. In your waiting room, you should have some kid-sized stuff, but you should also have some adult-sized stuff, right? So, what you communicate through the visual senses and through the other 5 senses, such as smell. You guys know, right? You probably walked into a program that doesn't smell real good. That is an instant thing that says there's no respect here, So think about those things as you were preparing. These are the foundations of relationships. You may not think about that, but they are. Because as soon as that family gets this thought in their head, remember, a vision is that image that is created because of some kind of input. That is what's going to be in the back of their minds the entire time. You need an area that respects both children and adults. It needs to say, this is a place for families. Okay, next slide. And believe it or not, something as simple as a name tag in events can make a huge difference. So think about it this way. You're new to the program and you're being on a tour. You're just on tour. You haven't even enrolled your child yet. But you have a name tag that says, hello, my name is, and I am the parent of this child, right? That gives you value. That says that you really want to develop a relationship with me. We're honored to have you in our building today, right? And then my favorite one is like, if grandparents come in or whatever, you have those special events and you bring people in. What is something that the child and the person that is with them share together? And then they can go around and once you do this and people are looking at other people's name tags, guess what you've just done? You've created a community of family relationships, and that is huge. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna have to talk a lot faster. When do we develop these relationships? Every day in every way. It is every second of the day. Anytime you have an interaction with a family member, with a friend, with whomever comes into your building, those relationships are developed all the time and should continuously be developed and have special attention made to them. Next slide. And then, so we're kind of breaking this down into those who, what, where, when, and why, right? Where, again, things like this family area, okay? Where they can get information. Where do they feel welcome? Where can they get answers to their questions? All of that. Next slide. How? What are the strategies that you can employ? Again, ask your families. Ask them, hey, we really want to make this a better place for you. What can we do? Okay. I loved highlighting a family of the week. That was my favorite thing to do in the newsletters. That's like, oh, let's meet the blah, blah, blah family, kind of like Family Feud, only we didn't feud. And I would just give some overview and, blah, 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 information that they agreed to let me publish, etc. But the bottom line is that they should always leave you feeling that their child is in good hands. They know about their child's day and they know how to support their child at home. Those are the three biggies. Okay. Next slide. So the next layer is communication, and communication is key. Next slide. It is quality versus quantity. So don't get hung up in, oh, we got to do this every month and this every week and blah, blah, blah. Don't get hung up in that. What you send out should be high quality and it should mean something. Okay. So again, this is part of your strategic plan. How do you want to communicate to your families? Well, one thing that you need to do is give them a survey. How can we communicate with you? Are you allowed to receive texts at work? Are you allowed to receive video at work? Would you rather contact you this way? Can you be part of our Facebook page or our website page? How would you like to receive a newsletter? Would you rather have a paper copy? Would you rather have an electronic copy? Would you want to have it both ways? That kind of thing. It is really, really understanding that it must always be two-way, okay? And it must always be ongoing. And it should be somewhat consistent. If you're going to do a monthly newsletter, do it on the same day every month as much as you possibly can. Okay, so that they know, they have an expectation. Oh, it's the first week of the month. I should be getting a newsletter that tells me this, this, and this. Make those newsletters meaningful. Don't put gobbledygook in it. Leave that for the classroom, okay? So birthdays and things like that, important dates for the entire program should go in there. There should always be on the very first page of your newsletter an article about child development, okay? For example, biting's been an issue in the toddler room, so I thought I'd share this information about biting, why it occurs, what it does, and what to do about it, okay? Not going to apply to everybody, but that's okay. It's good information anyway. So also, your newsletter should only be one page, front and back, even if it's electronic, because after that, they're going to be done. Remember, we're in the faster, cheaper, easier world. Instant gratification. So I want to know what I need to know, and then I'm moving on. Okay. So first page, generally, I put important dates in this nice article about child development. Back page, I highlight a family, I highlight a teacher, and that's pretty much it. That's all they need to know. And then the next month, they get a different version, right? So keep it purposeful, keep it short, and keep it meaningful to them, because once it becomes not meaningful to them, they're just going to pitch it. Either way, they're going to hit delete or they're going to throw it in the garbage can. Okay, next slide. So when and where, obviously, drop off, pick up, your events, conferences, parent info packets, I call those PIPs, love them. Those family boards, those family areas. Of course, you're always going to do those daily info sheets for those important details for children, newsletters, journals, portfolios. All of these things are where community, and you should use a multiple uh, variety of sources for this. Next slide. And of course, why is this important? Because it supports those relationships of engagement, is what I should put there. You learn about the child and the family. They learn about each other. They learn about you, and that's important as well. It gives perspective. You understand. Obviously, we know the more we communicate with somebody, the more we know, right? And so we are able to use that information then, of course, to improve our practices, to improve what we present to them and how we present our program. It is used to inform, of course, families of developmental progress. That's more of a private thing. That's not a newsletter thing. To support curriculum, always. To provide activities for learning at home, and to connect the community agencies and services. And I might highlight a community agency in my monthly newsletter as well. Hey, did you all know that such and such company provides this once a month for families? Something like that. Getting them out into the community and engaging those events. Or, such and such church is having a carnival this weekend and it's open to everybody. And these are the things that they're going to have for kids to do and families to do. That type of information. Next slide. So many ways we've talked about this. School blogs, you can do a podcast, you can send them a video via email. I mean, there are so many different ways. You guys see on Facebook sometimes principals will do fun announcements, especially if there's a snow day, they'll get on there and they'll sing a crazy song or something like that. Go outside of your box. I mean, I know sometimes it's not your cup of tea to do those things, but find somebody who can. If one of your teachers down the hall is like, oh, I love making up lyrics to songs, then let them do it. It doesn't always have to be you. So share that responsibility amongst the staff. Follow the 3x3 rule. If there is something that families need to know that's important information, they need to get it 3 times in 3 different ways. So give them a text, give it to them in a newsletter, sending them an email, pin a note to the backpack, whatever, 3 times, 3 ways. Huge, because it takes that much for them to understand it. If you just do oh, I pinned that inside the backpack, they're like, well, I didn't even look at my kid's backpack yesterday. But if you send them a text, I guarantee you they're going to look at that, right? Because we're dealing with the technological families now. Proofread it 3 times with 3 different people. Make sure you're not sending things out with errors. It matters. All right. Report, but really inform. Okay, this is information that you need to know. And I would put that at the top of my newsletter. Oh, what you need to know this month about child development, something like that. And then remember that color catches attention. So don't just keep it black and white, give it color, kind of like PowerPoint. Sometimes I send out a PowerPoint, just a small 5-slide PowerPoint. Here's this month's message or whatever, mix it up and give them predictable frequency. We know that by the 5th of every month, we're going to get a newsletter. We know every Friday we're getting those daily reports or weekly reports or whatever. So keep it consistent and predictable frequency. Next slide. And then understanding how to extend learning at home and in the community. And we've kind of already referred to some of these. Next slide. But it's important because everybody's involved, okay? One of my favorite ways to involve learning at home and connecting the community is take-home bags. So for every theme or topic that we did in our program, we made 5 bags of activities to send home with families so that they would get a taste of what was going on in the classroom, B, something fun to connect them at home, and C, a connection to Pyle's developmental milestones and early learning standards for my state. And then the last thing they got was generally a community sponsorship bag. So I asked the folks in my community, can you sponsor 5 bags for me? And here's what's going to go in each one of the bags. And we'll give you a bag to have in your office for when kids come in. Okay, so I just need like 20 bucks per bag, and we'll take care of putting them together. You get one, you get free advertisement. We connect you to families, see how that works. And inside the bag, there is one activity from each of the domains. So there's a language activity, there's a writing, there's a reading, there is math and science and all of those things. There's one activity in there with full instructions, everything the family needs to complete the activity, including a list of, here's what you can keep, and here's what I need you to send back. And that's how I connected all 3. Each activity was connected to the learning standard for the age group and a Pyle's developmental milestone. I'm killing like 5 birds with 1 stone in each one of those bags. And I didn't even have to pay for them because I got them sponsored from my community family members. And that's how that works, right? And I have a whole nother presentation on that. So if you guys want to hit me up for that, we can talk. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry, Alicia, we are going over. I'm so sorry. So think about who are the people in your community that can help you put these together. Next slide. Oh, I think back one. So, okay, I'm not sure where we ended up here, but again, these are just some of the ideas that you can have, but everything should have a purpose, okay? It should not just be like, oh, let's have a bonfire because it's fall. It should have a purpose. Next slide. Again, where these opportunities are, we just kind of talked about that, but these are just some ideas. My favorite is the Saturday field trip. And then everybody's like, what you talking about? What? That's my day off. You know what? You don't do them all the time. But choose like a Saturday a quarter and say, oh, for our quarterly Saturday field trip, we're all going to meet at the Science Museum from this time to this time. You know, bring your child. It's a family connection. The family pays for themselves, and like, unless there's an issue where I might need to be able to maybe get some sponsorship for that, which I can, because usually the place where I'm going will work with me on that. And we come and we do this, and then we eat lunch together, and everybody goes bye-bye. Okay, so think outside the box when you're thinking about some of these connections. Then the family, if they've never been to that museum before, then they might go, oh, well, for the next exhibit, we might want to go check that out. We're connecting them to their community learning opportunities. Next slide. And then, of course, how do we share them? Of course, we inform. We can create those packets to send out to our community providers. Invite them. If you just invite them, they will come. Lawmakers, policymakers, hey, please come to our event. We want you to meet and talk with your constituents. When you say that, they'll show up. We got a bunch of voting people. We're going to register them all to vote. That'll get them there. Bring them in because they will come. Okay. And barter. I'm never above bartering. I will give you this for that, just like I did with my take-home bags. Guess what? I will give you a bag to have in your office that kids can use when they come in, because most offices, unless they're like a pediatrician's office, they don't have anything for kids to do when the family brings their kids in. Problem solved. And by the end of the year, they might have 10 bags that they can rotate in and out. This for that. Next slide. And then, of course, all of this builds up to helping the families make those decisions and goals for their child. Next slide. So who's involved? The program, the family, and the child. Everybody should be involved in a family conference. Next slide. You got it, Kenneth. I will make sure to get these to you. What decisions and goals are made? Okay. This is all the stuff that we need to cover, right? It's not about, telling the family how bad Johnny has been for the last 6 weeks. That's not what this is about. And what are you going to do about it? No, 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 no. How are you guys doing? How is learning at home going? How's Johnny doing with some of these things? What do you want to see Johnny accomplish in the next 6 weeks? Johnny, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn about in the next 6 weeks? That's the goal for this, is how to really approach the families. Okay, how do you feel about Johnny's progress on this milestone that we talked about last time? Do you think that, we've met that? What do you think we should do about that? How can we get him from here to there, to the next step? Okay, here's some activities that I'm going to send home with you that's going to help you help Johnny do this. All right, collaboration. It's all about collaboration. Next slide. And again, it's however you decide to do this. Most everybody has conferences. Include the child, talk about their progress first, look at a portfolio of their work, and then provide the family with a goal sheet. Either before or after, however you want to do that. Go ahead and pop over to the next slide. So look at this kind of process here and see what I might be doing to get this decision and goal-making process go. I'm going to give them an intake survey when they enroll. I'm going to see where the child is through the family's eyes, because I'm going to give them the ASQ. The ASQ is a family survey. It is not an educator survey. The family needs to fill those out. Then I'm going to give them that communication survey. How do you want me to communicate with you? What would you like to see? I'm going to give them a good copy of PILE's developmental milestones. I'm going to give them a copy of our state early learning standards, and I'm going to give them a copy of DAP and the Code of Ethics, so that we are all held accountable in these goal and decision-making processes. Next slide. And these are just a couple of examples of things that you can have children fill out or have the family fill out for the child. And then, of course, something for the family to fill out to bring their questions to the family conference. Next slide. And then the very last thing is program level involvement. Next slide. And again, it's the same folks. Next slide. And just, again, taking all of these steps that we've used, gathering the information, and then giving them some choices. Would you like to be on our advisory committee and activity committee? Would you like to be our parent mentor leaders and mentor new families? All of these things you can put together to get them involved in the program type of things. Next slide. And, give an incentive for joining the Parent Advisory Council. If you are part of our council, we give you a $50 credit for the year. Hey, it's better than nothing, right? Next slide. So again, who, what, where, when, and why, these are the things. Everything just makes, we support them in being their own advocates. We give them the information. They then understand, because we've invited policymakers to an event, they now can talk directly to policymakers and they understand that process, right? Whereas if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't get that. Next slide. Sorry, guys, almost there. And now you've built it and they will come. Next slide. You've built that comprehensive system, piece by piece, layer by layer. Next slide. And we are done. Just a minute over. Sorry, but if there are questions, I can hang out. I don't know about anybody else, but thanks, Kenneth. Appreciate that. Any questions? Sorry, we kind of had to go through that a little faster than I wanted, but it's a lot of information.
So I think we can, if people do have questions, you can put it in the chat, or if you can unmute yourself, that's also fine. And we can take, if everybody's okay, we can take like another 10 minutes. We're
Sure.
a little flexible on this time here.
But I had to take a drink because I'm very dry. But yeah, happy to answer any questions. Alicia, did I see you put in there that you're going to send the PowerPoint out to folks?
So Kenneth actually works with the council, so I was letting him know that I can send it to him.
Oh, okay.
But I think it is important for everyone to know that this recording will be available on CAN, hopefully within the next week. So it'll get, once I have the recording completely together, it'll get uploaded. I'll also send out another communication, just, giving everybody access to it and where they can find it. But if you want just this particular slides, I think the recording is probably much more beneficial. But if you want the particular slides, you can send an email to alumni@cdacouncil.org, and I can get you a copy of the slides.
And please feel free to reach out to me too for anything in relation to this topic, or anything that you would like to know more in depth about each of the components. My pleasure to share. Become a topic very near and dear to my heart. Quite welcome. Thank you for attending.
So Dr. McKay, it doesn't seem like anyone has any questions. I think it's kind of safe to say that. So if you are okay with it, we can end our webinar and everyone can
Sure.
enjoy the rest of their Monday.
Absolutely. Have a great Monday, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.